The Hikikomori Horror, a psychiatrist's nightmare. As a psychiatrist, I've encountered many bizarre and unsettling cases throughout my career. However, there is one that continues to haunt my thoughts, a case that I have never fully been able to forget. In the small suburban neighborhood where I live, there's a family of 3. They've lived next door to me for years, ever since I moved in during the early 70s. The husband and wife, who are in their late 60s now, were married in the 1960s, and they had one son. He's about 30 years old now, but very few people have seen him in the last decade. This son, let's call him Taro, is the classic case of a hikikomori. For those unfamiliar, the term comes from Japan and refers to individuals who retreat from the outside world, often shutting themselves away for years at a time, isolating themselves from friends, family, and even society itself. Taro, like many hikikomori, has not left his room in years. He hasn't even been seen by any of the neighbors, and it's a well-kept secret, whispered about, but never openly discussed. For years, I noticed the parents' unease every time I'd see them. They were polite, but there was a palpable discomfort in the air whenever they talked about their son, as though mentioning his name was some kind of taboo. You could see it in their eyes, the weight of shame they carried. In Japanese society, family reputation is everything, and having a son who is a hikikomori is considered not just a personal tragedy, but a shameful reflection on the parents themselves. The last time I had seen Taro, it had been nearly 6 years. I never even heard him speak or make a sound. I've always been an observer, so I knew something wasn't right, but I kept my distance. Then, one late evening, a knock came at my door. It was Mr. Takeda, the father of the hikikomori. His face was a mix of concern and frustration. He knew I worked as a psychiatrist, and since we lived close, I had helped them on a few minor issues in the past. His voice trembled when he asked, "Can you come over to my house? It's about Taro." Something in his tone set me on edge, but I agreed to help. After all, I'd never really spoken to Taro, and I knew the family was in distress. I followed Mr. Takeda down the narrow street to their house. When we arrived, his wife, Mrs. Takeda, was waiting for us by the front door. She led us upstairs to Taro's room. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that seemed unnatural. As we approached Taro's room, Mrs. Takeda knocked forcefully on the door. "Taro!" she shouted, her voice trembling with a strange mixture of anger and desperation. "Taro, get up. Your father's here." There was no response from inside. The door was left slightly ajar, and Mrs. Takeda, without hesitation, pushed it open and stormed inside. What followed was something I will never forget. "Wake up, you useless piece of—" Her voice was shrill, harsh, as if years of pent-up rage had erupted in that one moment. Then, without warning, she grabbed a golf club from the corner of the room and began hitting the bed where Taro was supposed to be. The sound of the club smashing against the bed was sickening. I stood frozen in horror, unsure of how to react. It all happened so fast, her rage and the repeated thwacks of the club against the blanket. The whole scene was so frantic, so surreal, that I couldn't move. As Mrs. Takeda struck, I saw her face twist with the kind of grief and frustration that only a parent could feel. She was relentless, almost as if she were trying to force some response out of her son. Finally, I snapped into action. I rushed to her and managed to wrestle the golf club out of her hands. My heart was pounding in my chest as I tried to calm her down. But before I could get a grasp on the situation, I turned back to check on Taro. I don't know what I expected to find, but it certainly wasn't what I saw. I pulled back the covers, and what lay beneath them sent a chill through my entire body. There, under the blanket, was not the living, breathing son of the Takeda family. There was a dry, mummified corpse. The body was shriveled, its skin hanging loosely over brittle bones, a grotesque sight that no living person should have to witness. I staggered back, my mind reeling. It was impossible. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Mr. Takeda stood behind me, his face ashen. He seemed to collapse in on himself, as if the reality of what had just happened had finally broken him. I knew," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I knew he was gone, but I couldn't bring myself to admit it. I didn't want to admit it." My wife, she doesn't know. She hasn't known all these years. It hit me then. Mrs. Takeda had been living with the corpse of her son for years, thinking he was just locked away in his room, avoiding the world, but all along, she had been living in a nightmare of her own making. Her mind had fractured under the weight of the shame, the guilt, and the sorrow. She had somehow convinced herself that Taro was still alive, that he was simply refusing to leave his room. And in that state of delusion, she had continued to bring food, clean the room, and even lash out at the figure she thought was her son. But in reality, her son had been dead for years. The tragedy of it all was unbearable. Mr. Takeda had known the truth, but had allowed his wife to live in her fantasy world, because he couldn't bear to confront it either. They both carried the burden of guilt, and in doing so, they had condemned themselves to a form of living death. I don't know how they managed to cope with the horrific truth, but I left their house that night, my heart heavy and my mind spiraling in confusion. To this day, I still think about the Takeda family, about the dark and tragic love they shared, and how the line between reality and delusion can sometimes become so thin, it's impossible to see where one ends and the other begins. The Hikikomori case was never what it seemed. It wasn't a case of a boy who rejected the world. It was a case of a mother who couldn't let go of her son, even after death had already claimed him. And in the twisted web of grief and guilt, they were all trapped, living a nightmare far worse than any of us could ever imagine. The haunted Pickfair Mansion, a Hollywood ghost story. Nestled in the heart of Beverly Hills, California, stands the legendary Pickfair Mansion. A sprawling 56-acre estate, Pickfair became a symbol of Hollywood's golden age, its grandeur and elegance captivating anyone who laid eyes upon it. The mansion's history is as dramatic as the stories that have unfolded within its walls. Built in the 1920s by the iconic silent film stars, Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford, Pickfair was originally a modest guest house, but the couple transformed it into a magnificent four-story estate. With 25 rooms, a grand living room, tennis courts, and a large garage, it became a hotspot for Hollywood's elite. During its heyday, the mansion played host to some of the biggest names in show business, earning a reputation as the epicenter of celebrity life. The mansion was more than just a residence. It was the ultimate symbol of luxury and fame. For years, it was a place where stars gathered, entertained, and lived their glamorous lives under the spotlight. But as with many grand stories, this one took a dark and mysterious turn. In 1936, after a lengthy marriage filled with Hollywood's glamour, Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford decided to part ways. Their divorce was a shock to the public, and soon after, Douglas moved out of Pickfair, leaving Mary to live there with her third husband, actor and musician Charles Buddy Rogers. Together, they spent their years at the mansion until Mary's death in 1979. But it wasn't just the grandeur of Pickfair that made it unforgettable. It was the haunting presence that lingered there after the passing of its former owner. As time passed, whispers began to circulate about strange occurrences within the mansion. The most chilling of them all was the laughter of a ghost, which echoed through the halls, a spectral sound that seemed to come from nowhere, filling the mansion with an unsettling energy. The ghost, many speculated, was a woman who had been romantically involved with Douglas Fairbanks. Perhaps someone who had suffered a tragic fate, possibly even taking her own life because of a doomed love affair. Her spirit, it seemed, had never truly left the place that had witnessed her greatest sorrow. Her laughter, eerie and unnerving, was said to haunt the mansion for years, driving those who lived there to the edge of their sanity. In 1988, the mansion changed hands again. Pia Zadora, a well-known actress at the time, and her husband purchased Pickfair with plans to restore the estate to its former glory. However, after purchasing it, Pia revealed something disturbing. The mansion was so filled with the haunting presence of the female ghost that she was compelled to tear down the entire structure. The mansion that had once been a symbol of Hollywood's grandeur was reduced to rubble. By 1990, the original Pickfair was no more. What remained were the gates to the estate, a few scattered remnants like the swimming pool, and the crumbling remnants of what had once been the grand living room. Yet, even in its final moments, the spirit of the mansion lingered. Despite the mansion's destruction, the eerie legend of Pickfair and its ghostly resident lives on. To this day, the gates of the property stand as a reminder of its haunted past, where laughter still seems to echo faintly in the winds, and the ghosts of Hollywood's golden age continue to haunt the hills of Beverly. The haunted Raynham Hall, the Brown Lady Ghost. Nestled in the quiet countryside of Norfolk, England, Raynham Hall stands as a testament to centuries of history and mystery. Built in the 17th century, this sprawling estate is renowned not only for its unique architecture, which draws inspiration from European designs, but also for the chilling tale that lingers within its walls. Over 300 years, the hall passed through several owners, but it was the Townsend family who held it the longest, shaping its place in history. Today, Raynham Hall is one of the most visited haunted sites in England, drawing tourists from all over the world eager to uncover its secrets. The most famous of these secrets is the haunting of Dorothy Walpole, the woman forever known as the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall. Dorothy was the wife of Viscount Townsend, a man known for his violent temper and domineering nature. The couple's marriage was far from ideal, and when the Viscount discovered that Dorothy had been unfaithful, he reacted with a fury that would haunt the halls of Raynham forever. In an act of cruelty, the Viscount confined his wife to the hall, locking her away in isolation. For years, Dorothy was forbidden to see her children, living out the remainder of her life in the shadows of her husband's wrath. In 1726, Dorothy was said to have succumbed to smallpox, but rumors persist that her death was far from natural. It is whispered that the Viscount, in a fit of rage, pushed her down the stairs, where she fell and broke her neck. Whether this is the truth or not, no one can say for sure, but what is certain is that Dorothy's spirit never truly left Raynham Hall. Following her untimely death, people began reporting sightings of a ghostly figure haunting the estate. The apparition was always seen in the same place, wandering the grand hallways in a flowing gown. This ghost became known as the Brown Lady, as she was often seen wearing a distinctive brown satin gown that gleamed eerily in the candlelight. Her figure was elusive and fleeting, often just a blur of movement before disappearing into the shadows. The most famous encounter with the Brown Lady occurred in 1936, when Captain Provand, a photographer, and his assistant under Shira were tasked with taking pictures of Raynham Hall for a magazine article. As they set up their equipment, they felt a strange chill in the air, but nothing could have prepared them for what was about to happen. While photographing the staircase where Dorothy was said to have fallen to her death, the camera's lens captured an unmistakable figure. The image that emerged revealed the unmistakable form of a woman in the brown gown, seemingly floating down the stairs, her face obscured but her presence undeniable. The photograph, which became known as the Brown Lady photo, remains one of the most famous and haunting images of a ghost ever captured on film. Since that chilling moment, numerous visitors to Raynham Hall have reported seeing the Brown Lady for themselves. Some claim to have encountered her in the same location, while others feel her presence in various parts of the estate. The ghost of Dorothy Walpole, tragically trapped in a cycle of death and despair, continues to roam the halls of Raynham Hall, forever bound to the place where her life and death became a part of its haunted legacy. Despite efforts to capture more evidence or uncover the true story of her death, the Brown Lady's presence remains an unsettling reminder of a violent, unresolved past. Today, Raynham Hall stands as not only a historical landmark, but as one of the most infamous haunted estates in England, where the past and the supernatural collide in an endless dance of mystery. The Haunted House at 112 Ocean Avenue, USA. The true story behind the Amityville Horror. Nestled on the quiet, picturesque streets of Amityville, New York, the house at 112 Ocean Avenue stands as one of the most infamous haunted locations in the world. It's a place shrouded in tragedy, terror, and lingering spirits that have made it the inspiration for one of the most chilling and well-known horror movies of all time, the Amityville Horror. The haunting began in 1974, when the home was the scene of a horrific mass murder, an event that would go on to haunt its walls forever. The night was cold, quiet, and dark, until a gruesome act of violence shattered the peace. Ronald DeFeo Jr., the eldest son of the family, turned a rifle on his parents and 4 younger siblings, brutally killing them all in their sleep. The victims were found in their beds, each with a bullet wound to the head, leaving the authorities in shock. But what was even more unsettling was the fact that the killer was one of their own, a son who had grown up in the house. DeFeo's confession came quickly, but the details of his motive remain a mystery. He claimed voices in his head told him to kill, and some believed that these voices came from something far more sinister than just his troubled mind. Whatever the reason, the house had been marked by bloodshed, setting the stage for what was to come. Just over a year later, in 1975, the house was bought by a newlywed couple, George and Kathy Lutz, who were looking for a fresh start. They had 3 children and were eager to make a home in the spacious, 4-bedroom house. However, as soon as they moved in, they began to feel that something was terribly wrong. The first signs of trouble appeared almost immediately. The family began experiencing strange and terrifying occurrences, the kind that defy logical explanation. The couple tried to make sense of what was happening, but nothing could prepare them for the terror that would follow. George and Kathy, concerned for their safety, called in a priest to bless the house. But things only got worse. The priest arrived, and as he began to perform the ritual, he heard a deep, guttural voice coming from within the walls, telling him to get out. He was shaken and left the house immediately, refusing to return. As the days passed, the supernatural events escalated. Cold spots appeared in various rooms, furniture moved on its own, and strange smells filled the air, some like rotting flesh, others like incense. The family was constantly plagued by disturbing noises, like footsteps when no one was there, slamming doors, and mysterious voices in the middle of the night. One night, George and Kathy were both awakened by loud, menacing whispers coming from the walls. The most terrifying experience came when their young children began seeing disturbing apparitions. The house seemed to be inhabited by malicious spirits that took on a life of their own, tormenting the Lutz family at every turn. Kathy began experiencing vivid nightmares where she was attacked by an unseen force, and George found himself growing increasingly agitated and irrational, often finding himself awake at 3:15 a.m., the exact time the DeFeo murders had taken place. The Lutz family tried to fight back, but the hauntings continued to intensify, with objects moving violently around the house, doors slamming shut on their own, and a strange green ooze leaking from the walls. The terror became too much to bear, and after only 28 days, George and Kathy fled the house, abandoning their dream home in the dead of night. Despite numerous investigations by paranormal experts, the truth about what really happened at 112 Ocean Avenue remains a mystery. The house was eventually sold, but the reputation of the place endured. Many have speculated about the extent of the haunting, with some believing that the house itself was cursed by the gruesome murders that had taken place there. Others think that the spirits of the DeFeo family still linger in the shadows, waiting for their next victims. In the years since, the Amityville house has become an icon of the supernatural, inspiring countless books, documentaries, and films, most notably the 1979 movie, The Amityville Horror, which was based on the events described by the Lutz family. However, some skeptics argue that the entire story was a hoax, fueled by the Lutz's desire for fame and fortune. Regardless of the truth, the legend of the haunted house at 112 Ocean Avenue has captivated and terrified audiences for decades. To this day, the house remains a symbol of paranormal fear and intrigue. It stands as a reminder of the chilling events that occurred there, a place where tragedy, mystery, and malevolent spirits continue to haunt the minds of those who dare to uncover its secrets. The Haunted Mirror at Myrtles Plantation. Myrtles Plantation, located in St. Francisville, Louisiana, is often regarded as one of the most haunted locations in the United States and one of the scariest places in the world. Built on top of a former cemetery, the plantation's eerie history and chilling atmosphere have made it infamous for its supernatural occurrences. The land has witnessed unspeakable horrors, including multiple murders, and today it is said to be haunted by at least 10 spirits of those who met violent deaths on the grounds. Of all the haunted objects at Myrtles Plantation, the most notorious is a mirror that hangs in one of the rooms of the main house. This mirror, which has been there since the 1980s, is said to be the focal point of the spirits trapped within the plantation. Visitors to the house report seeing ghostly figures lurking within its glass, and some even claim to have seen handprints of children appear on the mirror's surface. But the most chilling of all is the belief that the mirror holds the souls of Sarah Woodruff and her children, victims of a tragic and violent death. The story of Sarah Woodruff and her family is one of the most haunting and tragic tales associated with Myrtles Plantation. Sarah, a former slave, had been poisoned, along with her children, by the plantation owner's wife. The details surrounding the death of the Woodruff family are murky, but it's widely believed that the plantation owner's wife, in a jealous rage, conspired with others to end the lives of the innocent family. After their untimely deaths, it's said that the spirits of Sarah and her children were unable to find peace, their souls trapped within the cursed mirror. Legend has it that, according to tradition, mirrors must be covered when someone passes away to prevent their soul from being trapped. However, no one ever followed this custom for the mirror in Myrtles Plantation, and as a result, the spirits of Sarah and her children are said to remain within its glass, appearing to visitors who dare to look into it. Some claim to have seen the tragic faces of the Woodruff family staring back at them in the reflection, their expressions filled with sorrow and pain. Myrtles Plantation is known for its ghostly sightings, including apparitions of former slaves, the sounds of footsteps echoing through the empty halls, and the faint sound of children's laughter or cries that seem to come from nowhere. Visitors have also reported feeling sudden drops in temperature, objects moving on their own, and strange, unexplainable occurrences. The mirror, however, is the most famous haunted object in the house. It is said to be so powerful that even cleaning it does not remove the ghosts that inhabit it. Many visitors have left the plantation feeling unsettled, claiming that something within that mirror has followed them home. The plantation itself is also filled with other haunted artifacts, each with its own dark history. While the full details of the Woodruff family's deaths remain unclear, what is certain is that the spirits of those who died tragically at Myrtles Plantation are still very much present, waiting to be acknowledged, and perhaps seeking justice for their untimely ends. For those curious about the full story of Myrtles Plantation and its dark history, there is much more to discover. Some stories are told through whispers of the past, while others are caught on camera by daring visitors who seek to uncover the truth behind the plantation's supernatural legacy. The plantation has become a must-visit site for paranormal enthusiasts, but be warned. Many who have stayed overnight there have experienced things that they can never quite explain. The haunted painting on eBay. In the year 2000, a mysterious eBay seller listed a painting that would soon become known as one of the most haunted works of art in history. The Hand Resist Him, created by artist Bill Stoneham. This eerie painting, completed in 1972, depicts a young boy and a creepy mannequin-like doll standing in front of a glass door. The unsettling scene would become a focal point of supernatural stories, leading it to be dubbed the most cursed painting ever sold online. The history of The Hand Resist Him starts in the early 70s when it was bought by Hollywood actor John Marley. After Marley's death, the painting passed through various owners, ultimately landing in the hands of a couple from California. It was they who would bring the painting to public attention by listing it on eBay with a chilling warning about the strange occurrences surrounding it. According to the couple, bizarre phenomena began soon after they brought the painting into their home. Every night, the figures in the painting, the boy and the doll, would move. They would even vanish from the frame entirely. The couple claimed that the boy in the painting appeared to leave the confines of the picture and step into the room where it hung. Anyone who looked at the painting for too long reportedly experienced unexplained physical discomfort, often falling ill or feeling weak. Children who saw the painting screamed in terror and ran away, while adults described a sensation of invisible hands grabbing at them or a sudden wave of hot air, as though standing too close to an open microwave. The unsettling energy didn't stop at the home. It seemed to extend to anyone who encountered the image, even online. People who viewed photographs of the painting on the eBay listing described a strong feeling of dread, as if something malevolent was lurking just out of sight. The couple, desperate to rid themselves of the cursed object, sold the painting to an art gallery in Grand Rapids, Michigan. When the gallery contacted the artist, Bill Stoneham, He was reportedly shocked that his creation had become the subject of paranormal research. Though he wasn't entirely convinced of the supernatural claims, he did mention that 2 individuals had died within a year of being involved with the painting, adding a mysterious layer to the already bizarre story. The terrifying reputation of the hand resist him continued to grow. Not long after the painting was exhibited at the gallery, more strange incidents were reported. Some visitors claimed that they could feel a presence in the room where the painting was displayed, and others experienced unexplainable cold spots. The painting's sinister power seemed to manifest in a variety of ways, from unexplained mechanical failures to physical disturbances. One person who tried to print the image on their new printer found that it refused to produce the correct print. Despite the printer working perfectly with other images, the hand resist him would not come out. Those who attempted to digitize or reproduce the painting in any way often reported that their equipment malfunctioned when it came to handling the image. The painting itself remains in the possession of the gallery, where it is carefully stored, but its cursed history continues to be a subject of fascination for those intrigued by the paranormal. Some believe the painting is cursed due to its dark origins or the disturbing nature of its subject matter. Others suspect that it's the spirit of the boy or the mannequin doll, trapped in the frame, seeking to escape. Over the years, the hand resist him has inspired countless tales of hauntings, ghostly apparitions, and the idea that art itself can be possessed. Whether or not the painting is truly haunted is up for debate, but one thing is certain. It remains one of the most chilling pieces of art ever created, with a legacy that haunts those who come into contact with it, whether physically or through its image on the internet. For those who are brave enough, the haunting story of the hand resist him lives on, and its supernatural history continues to send shivers down the spines of those who dare to look too long into the eyes of the boy and his eerie companion in the glass.